Donald Trump just threatened to block the most important trade artery in North America unless Canada pays up. He says the United States was excluded from the project. He says Canada owes him money. He says this is about fairness and making sure America isn't taken advantage of. There is just one massive problem with that story. Canada already paid. We didn't just pay our share of the bill. We paid for the whole thing. Over $6 billion in construction costs have been fully funded by Canada. This wasn't a clever negotiation tactic designed to get a better deal. This wasn't the art of the deal in action. This was a glitch in reality. Because when you look at the facts, not the tweets, but the actual contracts, you see something very different. You see a project that Trump himself fast-tracked and called vital back in 2017. You see a legally binding agreement where Canada covered the bills so that American workers could pour the concrete. And then there is the hockey part. You almost have to laugh at the absurdity of it. In the middle of a high-stakes trade threat involving billions in critical infrastructure, he is tweeting about the Stanley Cup. It sounds funny at first glance. Claiming that a trade deal with China would somehow end the NHL sounds like a joke. But it is actually the most revealing part of this entire mess. When a superpower starts threatening your hockey team to win a trade dispute, they aren't negotiating from strength. They are grasping at straws. Today, we are looking at the receipts. We are breaking down exactly who paid for the Gordie Howe Bridge. We are explaining why blocking it is economic suicide for the American Midwest. And we are showing how Canada's response just exposed a massive crack in Trump's leverage. Let's strip away the noise and look at the ledger, because the numbers here don't lie. Trump's central claim is that the United States was excluded from the project. He claims that Canada needs to fully compensate America for the bridge. That statement isn't just wrong, it is the exact opposite of reality. To understand why, you have to look at the history of this deal. For decades, the Windsor-Detroit crossing was a bottleneck that choked the North American economy. Everyone knew we needed a new bridge. Business leaders on both sides of the border demanded it. But the politics in Michigan were a complete mess. Special interests fought to stop, and Washington didn't want to spend the money to build it. So the project stalled. Year after year, we saw gridlock. Finally, Canada decided enough was enough. We needed the trade route secure for our own economic survival. So we proposed a radical solution. We proposed a public-private partnership where Canada would shoulder the financial risk. Canada agreed to finance the construction, all of it. The expected cost exceeds $6 billion. We are paying for the bridge itself. We are paying for the massive ports of entry on both sides of the border. We are even paying to connect the bridge to the U.S. interstate system in Michigan. Think about that for a second. A foreign government is paying to upgrade American highway infrastructure in Detroit. Why would we do that? Because we needed to bypass the uncertainty. We needed to ensure our goods could move freely without relying on a single, aging crossing point. So we made a deal. Canada puts up the cash. Canada takes the risk. And we recoup that investment over 30 years through toll revenue. That is not exclusion. That is a bailout. Trump says America got nothing out of this arrangement. But let's look at the contract detail. American steel was mandated for use in the construction. American workers were hired to build it. The state of Michigan jointly owns the bridge with Canada. They got the jobs. They got the infrastructure. They got the ownership stake. And they didn't get the bill. Let's be clear about what this deal actually is. It is like your neighbor offering to pave your driveway for you. They pay for the concrete. They hire your cousin to pour it. And then you threaten to barricade the street unless they pay you again for the privilege of driving on it. That is not a deal. That is a shakedown based on a fantasy. And the wildest part is that Trump knows this. In 2017, his own administration issued the presidential permit to fast-track this bridge. He called it vital to American interests. He knew the financing structure then. Nothing has changed in the contract since that day. The only thing that has changed is that he needs a fight, and he picked the one target where the receipts are bulletproof. Now let's look at the threat itself. Trump says he will block the opening of the bridge. In the world of social media posts, that sounds like a tough power move. It sounds like America first. But in the real world of logistics and global supply chains, it is something else entirely. The Windsor-Detroit corridor isn't just a road. It is the busiest trade crossing in North America. It carries billions of dollars in goods every single year. Roughly 25% of all trade between our two countries goes through this specific choke point. If you block that artery, who bleeds first? It is Michigan. It is Ohio. It is the entire American Midwest. Here is the detail most people miss. The auto industry relies on something called integrated supply chains. That means a single car part doesn't just cross the border once. A transmission, a seat belt, or an engine block might cross the border up to 7 times before the final car rolls off the assembly line. If you stop the trucks at the bridge, you don't just delay a shipment, you stop the assembly lines in Detroit within hours. You stop the factories in Toledo. You lay off shifts in Indiana. And it is not just cars. Think about agriculture. Think about medical isotopes. Think about critical goods that require speed and open borders to be viable. This is where the logic breaks down completely. Trump isn't threatening a Canadian bridge. He is threatening a Michigan lifeline. You don't blockade your own factory gates to punish a supplier. That is not leverage. That is economic suicide. And the fact that he is doing it suggests he doesn't understand who actually holds the keys here. Even his own party knows this. Look at the reaction on the ground. You didn't see Michigan Republicans lining up to support this blockade. You saw Democratic leaders in Michigan publicly confirming the bridge would open. They know that closing it would devastate their own state economy. Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, called it out perfectly. He labeled it political theater. He questioned whether Trump would actually follow through, not because Trump is nice, but because it would hurt Republicans in the upcoming elections. If you crash the economy of a swing state by blocking a bridge you didn't pay for, you aren't winning. You are handing the midterms to your opponents. The threat is empty because the cost is too high for him. This brings us to the response, and this is where the contrast gets sharp. On one side, you have a meandering post rambling about alcohol sales, China, and the death of ice hockey. It is unfocused. It is inaccurate. It is chaotic. On the other side, you have Prime Minister Mark Carney and Premier Doug Ford. And this alignment matters more than you might think. In Canadian politics, liberals and conservatives don't usually agree on the color of the sky. But on this issue, they were in lockstep. It was a war room mentality. The domestic squabbles evaporated instantly. Notice what they didn't do. They didn't threaten to burn down the White House. They didn't post rambling screeds. Carney responded with a ledger. He explained calmly that Canada paid $4 billion for the construction. He noted the shared ownership. He pointed out the American workers. He framed the project not as a point of conflict, but as a symbol of cooperation. He corrected the lie without taking the bait. And then Doug Ford stepped in with the enforcement. Ford went on the record and dismantled the specific claims about U.S. workers and materials. He said bluntly that none of Trump's statements were true. But he went further. He explicitly warned the federal government, this is not the time to roll over. He rejected the narrative that Canada is taking advantage of the U.S. He flipped the script. He said, effectively, we are the ones paying the bills here. This sends a signal to Washington that Canada isn't fractured. We aren't confused. You can't drive a wedge between Ottawa and Toronto on this issue because the facts are too clear. Trump is used to creating chaos and watching his opponents scramble. But here, the chaos met a wall of verified facts. Observers noted that Trump is surrounded by advisors who reinforce misinformation. That creates a dangerous feedback loop where false claims become policy. But when those claims hit a partner who kept the receipts, the loop breaks. This wasn't about owning the libs or MAGA. This was about a contract. And Canada is the only one who brought the paperwork. So what does this actually mean for the next 4 years? It means the old playbook is broken. For decades, the assumption was that when the U.S. president sneezes, Canada catches a cold. The assumption was that we have no leverage, that we are always the junior partner, grateful for whatever scraps we get. But this bridge incident proves otherwise. Trump tried to manufacture a crisis. He used every trick in the book. He used misinformation. He used threats. He used cultural grievances about hockey, and it backfired immediately. It backfired because the economic reality of 2026 is different. Canada has diversified. We have strengthened our ties beyond North America. And most importantly, we stopped apologizing for being a sovereign nation. In the end, this wasn't a crisis. It was a clarity moment. It proved that in 2026, you can't just tweet a lie and expect Canada to fold. When you bring receipts, $6 billion worth of receipts, the truth becomes the ultimate leverage, and that changes the game. If you want to stay ahead of the spin and understand the real power dynamics shaping our future, make sure you are following along. We don't just read the headlines, we check the math. Thanks for watching.